Now let's talk about the inextricable entanglement of politics, culture and gender, and how to end decades of discrimination against women in Nigeria. Currently, the rights of women in this country are in the middle of a real political knot. Proponents of gender equality have been pushing a bill at the National Assembly that promotes women's equality in marriage, inheritance, education, employment, etc. But the bill has run up against strong opposition and has once been rejected by lawmakers who say it is incompatible with Nigeria's cultural and religious beliefs. So activists have asked the lawmakers to reconsider and have represented the bill. So where do things stand now? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by two strong supporters of the Gender Equality Bill who've been working with the sponsors of that bill in the National Assembly. Saudatu Mahdi is the Secretary General of the Women's Rights Advancement and Protection Alternative, or RAPA, and by Hamzat Lawal, who is CEO of Connected Development, or CODE, an NGO that empowers marginalized communities in Africa. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. Let me start with you, Saudatu. Just summarize for us the main points of this bill and why it's important.
Okay, thank you very much for having us. And why it is important, I think, should come first. It's important because it's one of the strategies or mechanisms, and this means policy and institutionalization of the rights of women to equal opportunities in this country. As we speak, the Constitution in its provisions provides for all citizens accessing rights and privileges as citizens of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. However, we know it is not the same for men and women in this country. Secondly, the bill seeks to give life to that section of the Constitution, particularly 1473 or 14.3, which says in everything that we do in this country, consideration should be given to access on equal basis for people from different parts of the country. And what this bill is saying, can you also include the terms of gender and the terms of sex so that it is open and it is understood without any ambiguity that men and women, boys and girls, should have equal opportunity and access to the things that make them citizens of this country. The contents of the bill speak to the access to education, equal access to education, equal access to career entry and growth, equal access to public office, equal access to development, equal access to economic and social privileges and rights in this country. So essentially, it is about setting the balance right. It is about accessing the same rights within social and official context. Yes, in marriage, people have pushed back to say that there are different responsibilities for people in marriages or in other relationships. The important point is that they have an equality of dignity in those relationships. They have an equality of responsibility in those relationships. And most importantly, one party cannot exist without that.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much for putting that in perspective. I'll come back to you in a minute, but let me come to you, Hamza. What she's saying seems like a pretty reasonable law to ask for in the 21st century. Why was it rejected in the first place?
Well, I'm not sure the wisdom of our older generation that put together the Nigerian 1999 Constitution as amended. But this bill would at least help us right those wrongs.
Yeah, but they rejected it.
Well, they did
at the outset.
Before now.
Yeah.
But now there's another opportunity. There's a renewed hope and opportunity.
Yeah, but I want to understand why it was rejected in the first place.
Politics, the politics of religion, the politics of ethnicity and beliefs. But these politics are not even the politics that truly empowers how society should run. Sadly, the leaders at that time, and up till today, people are scared of women. They're scared of women because they are. Oh yes. Oh, this is. Without mincing words, we all know that women are natural leaders.
Yeah, they
and
are.
these men have kept us on our knees. And you know that when women occupy public offices and public position, they look at how they would empower generations and generation yet unborn. So these men who are entangled in politics and have nothing other to do than politics, and now that stumbling block. But I believe that there's a renewed hope that, see, we cannot just provide lip service to equity and gender. By the way, this is about rights of people. Let's even forget gender. This is about rights and dignity of people. And as a country, we cannot grow if we look at women as people who should occupy some certain position and role in society. No, come on, this is 21st century. So we're saying that this bill would help to even kickstart righting that wrong.
I think I want to add to what Hamzi is saying. I think the major issue is, first of all, about tripping the balance of power. The power relations in all of our contexts, in family, in jobs, in economics, in the markets, is about a balance that, you know, people are afraid of tilting. An empowered woman, an educated woman, an enlightened woman, don't forget about going for degrees in the university. A woman who understands her being, who understands her value, who understands her responsibilities about being able to contribute to the development of her family and community is something many men find difficult to grapple with. That is the first. Secondly, they accuse the bill of tampering with religious and cultural values that they hold dear to. And these, when you look at them, are either a factor of misrepresentation of religious texts or a fear of, you know, upsetting the balance of power between men and women.
Yeah, but some of these things, these oppositions, are coming from Islamic clerics. It's coming from the top leaders of Islam in Nigeria. How can they misinterpret the law?
No. You see, I think we need to be very clear.
Right.
There is this misunderstanding. A lot of this, the highly placed religious leaders do know that the Quran, more than any other thing, awards rights to women even more than.
So you think it's political then?
So more of it is political and a communication gap,
right,
an understanding of the concept. I think somewhere in the first instance when the bill was rejected, one of the things we felt we needed to do was to unpack the concepts of the Gender Equal Opportunity Bill, so that when people hear equal opportunity or equality, I mean, it's not about sameness. Equality is not sameness. It's about the opportunities that we have as human beings, as dignified Nigerians, and as eligible Nigerians with a responsibility to contribute to its development. So the concept
in other words, we can still get her to go to the other room, but we'll give her an opportunity to go to school.
Absolutely. The other room is non-negotiable because it's a human relationship, for goodness sake. It's a human relationship. So the other room is still going to be there. But I go to the other room, or he comes to the other room, knowing very well that I have human dignity, I have rights, and he must respect those rights, and I must respect.
And by the way, I'm not trying to downplay the importance.
No, don't you worry.
The points you're making are very, very important.
Yes.
But let me ask you this, Hamzat. Given that by your own admission, I mean, I've read some of the things that you've talked about in this regard, Nigeria has not abided by the many international instruments that it's signed up to that prohibit discrimination. What makes you think this bill, if it becomes law, is going to be any different?
Well, because, again, when you look at countries that have floated international treaties, there is no legally binding
domestic law
that would help ensure that when they float it, there are consequences. But when we have this Gender and Equity Opportunity Bill, what it means is it sets a legal and regulatory framework that empowers both men and women and provide equity, justice, and a level playing field where women can start contributing more to nation building.
Well, I mean, the key thing is beyond the theory, the enforceability of that law, isn't it? I mean, that's why you've got to make it domesticated so that it can be enforced.
But here is a bill that seeks to amend the provision of the Constitution, that seeks to enhance the Constitution and right those wrongs. So this is beyond any treaty. This is about our local laws that are governed locally and ensuring that women plays their role and take over leadership role.
But Saudatu, does it require a specific bill? Because I know the Nigerian constitution is going through a process of amendment, and I've spoken to some of those members of that committee and so on. I mean, one of the things they've got in there is the issue of discrimination against women, that they want to right the wrongs that have been done and enshrine in the constitution the rights of women. I mean, why does it require a separate bill from that?
Well, like we always hear the lawyers say, the constitution is a grand norm. That is, it gives the big framework. The
big picture, basically.
But you need to be able to find what we call, or what lawyers call, integral laws. That is, laws that further give life to the provisions of your constitution. And in that regard, you can have as many legal frameworks, I mean, as many legislations as possible, until the understanding of what that constitution provides rings down home in policy, in action, and in compliance, as well as accountability. So yes, we have Chapter 4 of the 1990 Constitution, which speaks to freedom from discrimination. But to what extent or in what forms do we see discrimination in our society? And in that regard, the Gender Equal Opportunity Bill, unpacks what discrimination is in social and public life, in education, and so on, and speaks to prohibition for exclusion, also promotes inclusion as well as protection and accountability for the variations that come. I think one of the things you need to really say, or we need to really speak to, is: are we willing as a nation to respect our constitution? Are we ready as a nation to respect our commitments at the international global level? We belong to a committee of nations. We cannot go there and sign instruments and come back home and fail to domesticate them. However, where we find anything that does not fundamentally move away from what the treaties say, there's nothing that stops you from looking at your context. I think part of what we need to push forward as advocates is that where a law has to provide for context that is negative to the rights of people, we should not promote it. Because human rights are rights that are clear. They come from above, and there's no interpretation. What you need to do is to enable your citizens to understand what it means. If there are concepts that sound off or that sound controversial to some, unpack them, negotiate them, and enlighten people, and then negotiate acceptance. As we speak, this bill has gone through a review.
Yes, because I was going to ask you, where does it stand at the moment?
It's awaiting its second reading. I'm the chair of the technical working group that is selling the bill. We have done great work around advocacy. We have spoken to the media. We've done as much as we can, one, to get knowledge across about what it means.
And is that what has moved it forward, or did you have to do modifications to the bill?
We had to modify.
Okay.
We have modified certain provisions.
Okay, and I would like to talk about those modifications when we come back, because we've got to take a break. But very, very interesting, really interesting analysis that you're giving there, both of you. And please stay with us. We're going to come back in a minute. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the Gender Equality Bill in Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, for decades, Nigeria and Africa have been grappling with gender equality since the continent's nations came into being, perhaps even before. Yet, even as the struggle continues, it is also plain to see that the corridors of power within, for instance, Nigeria's federal and state governments and the boardrooms of companies have been steadily filling up with women. The optimists would say that this is an encouraging sign compared to, for instance, some places in the Middle East. But the real issue here, say campaigners, is the lot of ordinary women in the farming fields and in marketplaces, in townships and villages, in churches and in mosques. That's the real measure of gender progress. And they say in those places, Nigeria is still deeply aligned with a kind of ancient African patriarchal conservatism, which perpetuates female powerlessness and binds them to the will of men, which is why there's a big push for a gender equality bill in Nigeria. And supporters of that bill, Saudatu Mahdi, Secretary General of the Women's Rights Advancement and Protection Alternative, and Hamzat Lawal, CEO of Connected Development, an NGO that empowers marginalized communities in Africa, are still with me in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. Obviously, you've got, I think we mentioned this before we went on the break, you've got clerics, both Christian and Muslim, saying that this bill is a violation of their laws, the laws within their religions. And do you see that as a major stumbling block that gets in the way of what you, because these are people who are pretty influential in society.
Well, Charles, what I'm hearing, and with our engagement with them as key stakeholders, it's quite the opposite. They're now in support of
They're now
bill.
on board.
Oh yes, they're now on board. And if you look at provisions in the Quran, if you read the Bible, it empowers women. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned, women 3 times before he even acknowledged a man once. And when you look at our laws and our religion, it actually empowers and protects the right of women. So again, unlike my mom here has said, it was a miscommunication. And today we have clerics, we have sheikhs and imams who are in support and who are now advocates and in support of this very important legal and regulatory
So let me ask you this, Saudatu. What were the amendments and changes, modifications you had to make in order to get them on board when just a few years ago, I think it was 2016 or something, they didn't want to be on board?
Well, first of all, I think the major issue was nomenclature. For instance, around the issues of inheritance, there was a pushback on the fact that there is an attempt by this bill to tamper with the rations or the ratios that have been prescribed
between men and women.
Between men and women.
Right.
And that has been discountenanced to the effect that women and men will inherit inequitable shares without prejudice to what the religion prescribes. So
in other words, 50-50.
That's not 50-50. We're not talking to 50-50. In the Quran and in Islam, what you have is shares according to congeniality of the testator and the deceased. So the Gender Equal Opportunity Bill is not and does not in any way tamper with those ratios. The second thing is also about the relationships in marriages, particularly as we have widows and widowers. Now we have added the nomenclature of widowers. With some rights, this is the same as we have. Then we have that of the issue of custody of children. Again, we have had to go through to understand one convention, common law statutes and also religious statutes. And all of these areas we have amended. There's also the pushback from the corporate world in terms of accountability, where they feel that we have put in provisions that put on responsibilities on them without looking at the obligations of their employees. Again, we have looked at that. Experts, constitutional experts, lawyers of repute from universities, from chambers and so on have looked at this bill, and we have submitted a copy of the amended bill for public review, and it has come back positive. We have also received positive responses from the clerics, both of Christians and Muslim clerics, and we have also tried our best to use the text of religion to justify the provisions that are in the Gender Equal Opportunity Bills. So if you ask me, I want to assure Nigerians, particularly where we got the pushback and the misrepresentation of this bill, that we've done enough sensitization, but sensitization can never be enough. We've done as much as we can, and we believe what we have done will help sail through the second reading of the bill, and that Nigerians should be assured that we are also Nigerians. We are also culturally inclined, but we will not be inclined to any culture that demeans the humanity of another. We
Very
would
good
support
point.
dignity.
I'm going to come back to you and talk a little bit more about public opinion.
Yes.
But let me come to you, Hamzat, because obviously there'll never really be lasting change, will there, until more people, both men and women, are better educated and better empowered.
Yeah, true.
So, it doesn't matter what you write in a constitution. The person in the village who can't read and write, or they're just going to keep living the way they do. And a lot of it also has to do with the psychological disposition of the women who accept this as, or as a case of having to accept, basically?
When this law is passed. So the thing is, it's not about public opinion or what the norms are. When there is a law, it is now mandated by the provisions of the law and the custodians of the law, and that's why you have rule of law. So even if it's a norm, then government will now start budgeting. So you now have responsive budgeting that promotes gender equality, that educates the public, but most importantly, it also protects the right of women. So law helps guide government programming, and then civil society, private sector would also play a key role. But I believe that yes, this law has a key role to play. Again, even if it's a norm, the law helps, rewrite those wrongs and help people unlearn, and then they relearn, and then you start having acceptability.
But it's absolutely essential to have the law in place, then you can move forward.
Oh yes,
from
the
there.
law sets the framework for us to drive it.
Right. So, Saudatu, beyond the religious leaders, the politicians, the members of the National Assembly and so on, what sense do you get of where public opinion lies with this bill? I assume there have been public hearings that have been held or are going to be held.
I think the first selling point for the Gender Equal Opportunities Bill is that it is a bill that is looking at the vulnerabilities we all face as men, women, boys and girls. Secondly, it is also a bill that is in tandem with the provisions of our Constitution. It is nothing new. It is just explaining and expatiating on what those rights. In terms of public buy-in, and that's one of the things that we are trying to see. One of the things we want to do is, one, simplify the law itself, interpret it into local languages, go into a lot of conversations at the community and the grassroots level with people, have questions thrown out at us, have insults thrown out at us, and we take them in within our stride and ensure that people do understand the law. Buy-in is a very, very difficult thing. Of course, laws are seen either as an imposition or as a buy-in of people themselves. People need to regulate their lives. And one of the things we have found is that inequality, gender inequality, is something that has lived with us from time immemorial. It is also a factor of the socialization we have raised our children and we are raising ours, we interface with. So we need to sell it as everybody's bill. We need to sell it as everybody's benefit. Where there are pushbacks, let us negotiate them, bring out the difficult points, and see how we allay the fears of those who are against it. Thank you.
And a final word to you, Hamzat. Are you optimistic, hopeful that this time you'll get it through? We've got about 30 seconds.
Yes, I'm optimistic because the 9th National Assembly has an opportunity to write their names in history and in gold, and Mr. President is looking at his legacy beyond his presidency. And I'm excited that we're also engaged in the Conference of Speakers to fast track, domestication at the state level. So I'm optimistic, and this makes me proud and excited that, we have men running around this bill.
Well, on that bucolic note, I want to thank you very much indeed, Hamzat Lawal, CEO of Connected Development, and of course, the very articulate Saudatu Mahdi, who is the Secretary General of the Women's Rights Advancement and Protection Alternative. Thank you very much indeed. That's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja and around the world. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.